One of the really positive things about the school system in Shrewsbury is that we have an ethic of continuous improvement. So we have been immersed in strategic planning for some time. And the pace of change, the rise in anxiety on behalf of students, the need to consider mental health and social emotional learning kind of drove us to think about as a community, first kind of at PTO levels, but also as a leadership team, how well were we doing meeting these new demands and how we were going to balance them. And the Portrait of the Graduate helped us think about this missing component, which was what are our vision for our graduates, and how does that fuel this change that we're considering?
It's not just about what kind of academic knowledge they have and what kind of academic problems they can solve. It's what do they think is important for our world? What will they notice? How will they communicate with each other? Because our work really means nothing if we aren't really thinking about the big picture. And it really impacts what we focus on day to day.
So the first step was to build a working group, invite members of higher education, community members, parents of graduates, parents who had current students in school, educators, administrators, school committee members, local politicians. This group was going to be tasked with creating a draft, and large enough that you could have a rich debate and different perspectives and hash out some of the things that we knew to be tensions, like how important is content knowledge? What parts of the content knowledge should be prioritized? How important is it that we're developing resilience, and is that a school's job? All of those pieces of leadership, does every child need to be a leader? What does it mean to be a leader? Needed to be hashed out in that group because they were going to become components of this vision.
We had debates. We went back and forth about things. And oftentimes it was the things that were most similar that created the greatest debate. Where do we put this idea? In this bin, in this bin. But there was a lot of exchange, and there was a lot of people with very valid real-life experience. We had people that were at the cutting edge of technology and could immediately and personally understand how that technology was going to change the rules of the game for these kids when they graduate.
And I felt like, I was valued, my opinions were valued, and it made me feel like this profile of a graduate really was a community effort. It wasn't just from the top down and, here's something you have to do.
Parents know their children, right? And parents are too often left out of the process of education. If you don't involve parents in that conversation and you don't ask parents what their goals are for their children, then you're just really missing a great opportunity to know students better. And once we know students better, we can serve them better.
So, many times I've been part of these strategic planning types of discussions, and they start with an answer, and essentially the process is a way of getting buy-in to an answer that's already known. What I thought was unique about the way the Shrewsbury school system did it was they started with the question, and they really invited a very broad and open dialogue into what potential answers might be.
I think some of the most important questions we asked at the beginning were the questions that we asked to people in business and said, what are you missing? When students are coming out of college and they're applying for jobs in your field, what don't they have? Sometimes that was difficult to hear. What don't they have? Because you're sitting there going, well, of course they have that. I did that. And then you have to reflect and think, maybe I didn't.
There were things that people said that, at first I really did not agree with. But, the part of the thing we're trying to do is to hear what other people have to say, judge the quality of the information, and incorporate it into our worldview. We're asking our students to be able to do that, so we need to be able to do that as well.
I think that Shrewsbury is actually giving their students a voice, which I think is really helpful. So it was a lot of good conversations, and we were able to really come down to a conclusion of what we think Shrewsbury High School did well, what we could improve on, and how a graduate should really look like.
I definitely think we're in a day and age now where there's a lot of change coming, and I think the education system as a whole is making a whole new shift, especially with technology. So I think this portrait allows students to maybe think more critically of themselves and think more for their future of what they see themselves doing.
there were so many steps in the process before it was finally boiled down into those 6 specific characteristics.
So 2 of the most important qualities for me were global citizenship and engagement and leadership. I think the reason these were so important is today we see the need for students being empowered learners, for students being critical thinkers, and for students understanding the need to engage with their community around them and not just be thinking about their own lives.
Communication, collaboration are really 2 key critical skills I think students need wherever they go, whether they enter the workforce, whether they enter the military, whether they go to college or university. Those are really skills that if you're good at that, you'll be successful at almost anything.
And then after the draft came out, we had a more formalized vetting process for that draft and a community conversation, because if the vision was going to have any legs, we needed to have everybody's voice honored, and we needed to have investment in what that vision was.
So once they had the working draft, they put it out to the community. They put it out to the people who weren't involved in that working group, and they did lots of different information gathering sessions to see, what do people think? Are we on here? Are we off here?
I would start by saying, how would you measure success when your child graduates from high school? What would you look back at and say, this was a good education? What holds high value to you? Let's look at this framework and see how it addresses that. And are there characteristics that you want to see in your child that we haven't included here? So that's kind of how we would start the conversation.
I mean, I think we feel really proud that we've achieved this final draft, and the school committee has signed off on this final draft, but I think we still have to live it. And I think sometimes people feel like when you get the document, you're done, and we're not done. It would be easy to say, oh, we've got the portrait of graduate, here's what, put it in the binder, get it in the school committee notebook, and it's done. We have to really think about, where is that gap between where we are now and where we want to be? How do we invest kids in giving us feedback about that gap? And how do we train teachers and continue the conversation we're having about what innovative school is like so that we can get closer to that vision?
I think the next steps are to really roll it out to all the teachers and make sure they're really clear about it and what it means and its value. I think the people who should be doing that are not the administrators, but other teachers, the people who are involved, the students, the parents, showing them, look at the stuff you're already doing in your classroom. Now let's work around a common language to articulate how this is preparing our students for the world beyond high school.
If I had to give one piece of advice to other school districts who are trying to embark on this, I would say, be prepared to challenge some of the things that we think you know, and don't start with an answer. The process, in many ways, is as important as the ultimate answer itself.
My hopes and dreams for it would be, as a community member, someone who lives in Shrewsbury and someone who's had daughters come up through the school system, is that it would become a living document for the whole community, not just something that comes out of Shrewsbury Public Schools, but something that is really, this is the Shrewsbury community's hopes and dreams for their young people. This is what we want, and we're all working towards that.